So you may recall, last week on the Host Productions I reviewed The Star Beast, and I discussed all the exciting things which have occurred within this brand new era, and I realised that I barely even discussed David Tennant as the 14th Doctor. I said something along the lines of, in Wild Blue Yonder it looks like a very character-focused story, it'll focus quite a lot on the 14th Doctor and Donna. It turns out that that statement actually carried a lot more weight than I initially thought. Hello everybody, welcome back to another Doctor Who episode review. In today's review I'm going to be taking a look at the second episode of Doctor Who's 60th anniversary celebrations with Wild Blue Yonder, as written by Russell T Davies, of course the second episode of Doctor Who The Bridge. I do feel like I'm really hitting home the whole The Bridge reference, because that is apparently what they called it during production, simply because I think it sounds really cool. Very much like last week, this is a completely candid sort of sit-back review. I've just bought myself a lovely cup of tea, Wittard's finest, and I'm just going to talk about what I think about the story, really, because I really enjoyed it last week. I really enjoyed actually talking about a visual episode of Doctor Who for once, because for those of you that don't know, in recent years has very much focused on wider Doctor Who media, especially Big Finish audio dramas, so it's very nice to be back taking a look at Doctor Who's core TV show. So I hope you enjoy. Maybe boil yourself a cuppa as well, and sit back and listen to me ramble for a bit. And maybe whilst you're boiling that cup of tea, double check that your arms aren't too long in the process. Hello, before we do that, this is Ben, who is currently editing this review. I actually recorded this review prior to the airing of The Giggle, although I didn't get it uploaded and reviewed in time, so ignore any of my wild theories that I mentioned within this video that didn't inevitably end up happening, no surprises there. But I thought that would kind of still keep them in, just for fun, to show you what I was theorising at the time when the episode aired. So anyway, on with the video. So it has to be said, this story wasn't what I expected, at all, but then again, it was rather unknown what this story would be about in the first place. I've seen Russell T Davies say something along the lines of they wanted to keep this one secret because it's the simplest of the three stories, and yes, in some ways, I completely get why they have done that, but I also get why that could absolutely backfire and be a really bad idea. Especially when bookended by Beat the Meep returning and the Celestial Toymaker, and whatever other mysteries are yet to unfold within The Giggle, plus the fact that this is of course all under the umbrella theme of Doctor Who's 60th anniversary. It's very easy to get overly excited and think about every single possible character that could be returning, including everyone's favourite pet penguin, which sadly hasn't come back. One day, Frobisher, one day. I really did try my best to moderate my expectations within the week running up to Wild Blue Yonder in between the Star Beast, but I must admit, even I did fall victim to the wild theories that appeared on social media on the build-up to this story. And to be honest, if you aren't a fan of Doctor Who Series 4 or Tennant's take of the Doctor or Donna Noble, I can absolutely see why Doctor Who's 60th anniversary absolutely may not be your cup of tea. For me, I absolutely love this duo. It was the one that I grew up with as a kid. In fact, it was one of the many duos that I grew up with within Doctor Who as a kid, and for me that is kind of a celebration enough in its own right to kind of keep me happy and satisfied. But then again, it may not be for everyone, certainly when you consider that this is the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who, with the exceptions of the returning characters that we know about. It's not particularly celebrating Doctor Who in the same way that other anniversaries have in the past. Although I do have a feeling that The Giggle may contain lots and lots of references to make it more 60th anniversary-ish. And that's the thing that I have came to realise over the past few years. Celebrating Doctor Who and its various anniversary milestones is getting very, very difficult. Certainly because of the way that new series Doctor Who has been presented over the past few years. I feel like the stakes keep on getting higher and higher and higher, and the return of various characters now is almost taken for granted. The first era of Russell T Davies' Doctor Who was rather self-contained, but then as soon as Stephen Moffat came along, I feel like the stakes started to build from there. Everything started to get more busy, the timelines started to collide, you had voyages into the past and the future, those random cameos in there as well, characters like River Song, which definitely upped the stakes, and we kind of seen the Doctor being presented in ways that we have never seen them before, plus the fact that the 11th and 12th Doctors appeared to have sticked around for over 100 years or so, and then you contemplate Heaven Sent within there as well, or at least I feel like they did stick around for quite a long time when you consider the general canon of things. And then, of course, we reached the 13th Doctor era, and we had the Timeless Child thing and Flux, which obviously Doctor Who fans absolutely lapped up with overwhelming positivity. And all of this leaves me thinking Doctor Who as a TV thing is simply so big now. It is so big to actually contain within a singular anniversary series and cover absolutely every single era in its own right. And I think that it has been struggling with this for a while, and I think that Once and Future, the Big Finish 60th anniversary Doctor Who series, is a very good example of just tying in as many different characters and references to eras isn't particularly the best way to tell a story, because yes, Once and Future was very fun, but when it came to the overall story, it stagnated a little bit. I don't think it quite knew how to tie all of the elements together to actually make it one big grand story, and it did just feel like cameo central towards the end. Even as a 13-year-old, I wasn't fully taken by The Day of the Doctor. Yes, I did enjoy it as a story, but I honestly felt like An Adventure in Space and Time was a more worthy celebration of Doctor Who, being sort of an anniversary of it, a celebration of what Doctor Who is. It's something of which that exceeded my expectations, and in turn it felt incredibly special. I think that Wild Blue Yonder is a very similar kettle of arm-bending, slightly creepy looking fish. We've not had an episode like this ever. It's a very unique Doctor Who story, which in turn made me appreciate it for what it does, and I think that the giggle is going to be references to classic Doctor Who. I think that the Star Beast was very much the current excitement of the new series, and I think that this episode perhaps represents Doctor Who moving forward into a brand new era. It's kind of, since we're running up to Christmas, Ghost of Christmas past, present and future. One of my favourite moments within Wild Blue Yonder is before the No Things, or the Doctor Donna duplicates, whatever you want to call them, appeared, and it's when the Doctor and Donna are on the bridge of the ship and 14 realises just how far away they are, the fact that they are now in the depths of space, the very edges of the universe. And I love how the story plays with this mind-bending, overwhelming fear, those moments in life when you kind of realise how immense the universe is and how small you kind of feel, the way that it grows and grows and grows, forever expanding, and yet at the same time that never-ending mass has an edge to it, and how possibly can we comprehend that? The moment that we see the camera drone get unleashed from the ship and it kind of pans around to see the full extent of the ship that they are on, it's a great piece of CGI, twinned with an absolutely superb music score from Murray Gold. It's utterly breathtaking, and one of my favourite moments from the story, if not Doctor Who as a whole, in recent years. On first watch, not knowing what's coming, I really did find that nothingness incredibly creepy and unsettling. I felt really immersed within that moment with these two characters. I feel like this story really does play with that concept of space itself being the villain and being a very scary concept. Doctor Who is so used to whooshing about everywhere, but I feel like this story actually puts space into Doctor Who again, if that makes sense, and actually deals with that as a concept as well. And moving on to the No Things, they are very captivating, aren't they? Albeit very unexpected. Their intro scene is incredibly memorable, and My Arms Are Too Long is an inspired bit of bloody fun yet creepy writing. Each early interaction with the No Things has this really uncanny nature to it, and on first watch, to me at least, it did definitely feel like something was wrong immediately when Tenant and Tate started acting a little bit weird. They were the characters that we know, but then they're also really not at the same time. You could tell there was something lurking underneath. The weird smiles that they both pull, the cackling, the taunting rhymes throughout, the questioning, all kept me very interested. But again, it's not in-your-face drama, it's a very big leap from the Star Beast, and I can see why some Doctor Who fans may have not enjoyed that, and if anything, found it boring. But to me, it really hit a button with me, and it was a very good button indeed. The nice twist with this story as well is having David Tennant in kind of that baddie role means that we get to glimpse that darker performance side for David Tennant, something of which that he has done quite a lot of within media in recent years. If anything, since he left the role of the 10th Doctor, I've seen him kind of performing as those more chilling, scary roles, so it's nice to see him incorporating those techniques into Doctor Who, and I think it was definitely an unsettling performance. But equally as well, I think that Catherine Tate does a superb job. I think in particular the snarls she does, the very judgmental stares, are something that you don't expect in that way from Donna Noble. And again, that was very unsettling to watch. Despite how much I do like the no things, I do wish that the weird words and phrases, such as "my arms are too long," lasted just a little bit longer, as I think that this could have been a really creepy element of the story that could have been explored further, and I think it says a lot how just very unusual words, delivered in a rather odd manner, can actually make for a very chilling performance, and I think that the script could have used that, maybe just slightly early on in the story, to provide that suggestion that things are a little bit unusual. One of my other favourite moments is when Tenant takes off the tie and then he says something like, "Oh, I see. Once things are taken off, they stay there." I think that was really, really creepy because it's just really mundane, but it's like, oh, it's learning what we do, and that's very odd. Also as well, the fact that I am at the current time of recording very nearly a week after the broadcast of Wild Blue Yonder, and no official merchandising company has took it upon themselves yet to put on a t-shirt "my arms are too long," maybe even make the sleeves purposefully incredibly long, and release that as official Doctor Who merch. Why has that not happened? I mean, admittedly, it will be very, very inconvenient if the arms were literally too long, but you know, it would be a good joke for like 5 seconds before it will get a little bit boring. But with that in mind, we are now 2 weeks after the broadcast of the Star Beast, and there is no Meep plushie anywhere yet. I was expecting to add that to my Christmas stocking. What is going on? And speaking of weird words, Mavity. What a weird way to open this story. It was a very odd scene, and I don't think it particularly fit with the rest of the episode, and it did have a few funny gags within it, although I didn't really get how it directly influenced the rest of the story. It did seem like quite a big joke that ultimately led to nothing. And I'm also really surprised that Nathaniel Curtis was cast in the role as Isaac Newton, simply because he is an actor that I do believe Russell T Davies is very familiar with. He has appeared in a number of his projects in the past, and I'm very surprised that he has used his rather brilliant acting potential on a role that only appears very briefly within a story. But who knows, after all, it is Isaac Newton. Maybe he will return in the future. Maybe we'll have a shooty-themed Isaac Newton story. That would in fact be a really nice way to segue into the new era and connect 14 and 15's era together. Which, to be fair, I mean, I was kind of right. 14 and 15's era are connected, just not by Isaac Newton. Instead, they're connected via the hip, through a bi-regeneration, which, you know, I didn't see that coming, but hey-ho. Which brings me on to my next little thought, which is probably completely wrong. Mavity is continued throughout the story as a gag that they have changed history and accidentally made Isaac Newton name gravity Mavity. Very odd indeed. I think that for a gag, it is quite a big change to make. And yes, after all, it might just be a funny joke. There might not be anything else to it. But what if it isn't? And that's the thing with Russell T Davies. I feel like you can often look at things and just take them as a little bit of a joke, don't think about them too deeply, and more than often that is the case. But then other times, that isn't the case, and you should be digging deeper, and that is what my mind is currently doing. So it turns out it was a joke. Yay, I was completely wrong. But I'm just going to keep this in. Just, you know. I might not be wrong. They might come out to it in the future, to be fair. But if not, I've just wasted an afternoon theorising. When I say an afternoon, I wasted about 5 seconds theorising. But hey ho, I tried. So within the first 2 episodes of the 60th anniversary so far, everything in my opinion has felt very polished. It just feels quite slick. But to me, there's been something about it which feels very crafted. And yes, it is obviously crafted because it is a written TV show and Doctor Who isn't real, shock horror. And maybe I am feeling somewhat inspired by the fact that the reality-bending game-playing Toymaker is back within the next episode, but I do have a few reasons why that things have felt a little bit odd to me. So reason number 1, when the 13th Doctor regenerated at the end of The Power of the Doctor, of course, as many Doctor Who fans noted, the regeneration also seen the departure of 13's costume, and we've seen 14 regenerate directly into his brand new outfit, which does kind of suggest that something different is going on, and maybe the Toymaker has been influencing this incarnation from the very beginning as a part of one big game. Maybe all of these stories are set within the Toymaker's world, which I think is probably quite likely. Oh, look at that. I was wrong. Again. Other reasons. Oh god, he's going to go on to theorise even more. In the Star Beast, and this seems very, very finicky and small, 14 pulls the lawyer wig out of his coat from nowhere, which is very, very odd. Yeah, it might be very odd, but he just did it. It was a joke. It was a joke, Ben. Boil another cup of tea. Drink that. Go and do something productive with your brain, please. But then in this episode, he randomly pulls out a regular screwdriver, closely followed by his sonic screwdriver. And then following on from that, later on in the story, he pulls out an entire salt shaker complete with salt. Probably because he took it from Weatherspoons when he was drunk, and now he's realised that he's got a load of sand in the lining of his pocket. I don't know. And then he regrets doing that in the later half of the story. He almost makes a point of referencing it again to say that he regretted it. And I think, again, maybe that's suggesting the Toymaker, because from what I can remember of the Celestial Toymaker as a First Doctor serial, is that the Toymaker is from a weird realm that we don't quite understand. He's kind of this omnipotent figure that is a little bit mysterious, so maybe that's referencing the Toymaker breaking into our universe once again, who knows? Well, would you look at that? That detour did lead to something positive. I got at least something right. It linked to the Toymaker. There we go. Well done, Ben. 1 brownie point. Because that's the thing with the 60th, I think that the events of this 60th anniversary are going to have relevance to Ncuti's era. I feel like Russell is going to make a purpose for them to develop and take forward. I think that is very clear, which makes me think maybe, just maybe, there's a little bit more to it. It just all feels a little bit over the top, but in a fun, almost orchestrated way. That's the thing, these episodes feel orchestrated and crafted. Catherine Tate is once more very enjoyable as Donna, and it's very heartwarming seeing how much this character has changed. The determination to protect her family, her love for Rose and Sean, she's now content with her life, especially now she has her memories back. I think that she feels complete once again. And I think that that definitely is presented within the performance. I think that Catherine Tate demonstrates that dynamic incredibly authentically with Tennant's Doctor. Again, it kind of uses that relationship that was seen within Series 4, but then acknowledging that these two characters have changed as well. They've both been through quite a lot. They've had quite a lot of things going on in their past that can be quite snappy at times, but ultimately there is such a strong, close friendship there, and they want to protect each other as much as possible. And of course, whilst we are on the Nobles, let's talk about the lovely Bernard Cribbins returning for one final time as Wilfred Mott. What a delight, and what a lovely scene. It is so brief within the story, but I'm so glad it was able to happen, because it very nearly didn't. Especially given the theme of this anniversary special, I think it was crucial to have a little cameo from Wilfred Mott, because he has been so intertwined throughout these stories. Even though he hasn't been present, both of the episodes so far have made a point of referencing the character. We had Donna acknowledging him at the kitchen table with Sylvia, of course mentioning his days of looking into the sky and stargazing, and then we had references in the early half of this story as well, with the Doctor really wanting to meet him again, and then we also had, of course, him acknowledging his possible loss at the very beginning of the Star Beast, which of course wasn't the case. All of these moments, I think, really do showcase how, despite the fact that Wilf hasn't been present for basically any of these scenes, his presence is still well and truly intertwined throughout these stories, which I think is testament to both the performance of Bernard Cribbins, but also how important this character is and how much of an impact he has made within Doctor Who history. It's such a small yet magical scene which completes the Noble family and brought lots of joy to both me whilst watching along, but also many Doctor Who fans around the world, especially after 14's very open emotions displayed towards Wilf in the previous two stories as well. I think it made that moment extra special. So yeah, I'm very grateful it was able to happen. This story does also continue to look very snazzy indeed. The long spaceship corridors, the very fresh spaceship design, and of course the big explosion at the end, because due to budget reasons, ships can actually explode properly in Doctor Who now and look cool at the same time. I always think that explosions in the past have looked rather small, but the one in this story is massive. And of course one of the big things within this story is the acknowledgement to Flux and the Doctor's origin. Of course the way that Donna brings this up, or fake Donna, is very blunt. I think that perfectly evokes the right emotions from the Doctor. We really rub salt in the wounds and we get to acknowledge the implications that the era has had on the Doctor, which I think was very direct, especially given my comments within the previous review, where I mentioned it feels like we've moved on from the previous era very quickly. I was very surprised that we did actually see mentions to stuff directly from that era. I thought that Russell may have kept it a bit ambiguous but still referenced it, or at least fans of that era and sort of who've seen that era will know what they're referring to, but not actually mentioning it by name. I thought that might have been what they would have done. But yeah, it's very odd, and I think that I do appreciate it because it kind of ties everything together. And I also like the way that this is now stretching and ricocheting between multiple incarnations of the Doctor. It's kind of like the Time War. It's shaping the way that the Doctor works, which is quite interesting. Although, oddly, it's interesting within this story seeing those implications actually being reflected within the Doctor, because I don't think we've seen that as much as we could have within 13's era. Brings me on to the other point, and something that I'm coming to realise within the two stories so far, is that David Tennant returning to the role is really interesting, because I feel like his performance is definitely more mature compared to what we got to see with 10. He feels like as an incarnation, he knows himself a lot more, he's more confident in himself. Yes, obviously 10 was quite confident anyway, but I feel like he's a more well-rounded character that has been shaped by things, and I think that he generally has more levels to him, and it's a shame that this Doctor isn't sticking around for long, because I feel like they could have done lots of interesting things with 14, which sadly we will now probably not get to see. But hey, maybe Big Finish can do something in the future, I don't know. Ah, David Tennant not sticking around. Imagine that. How wrong was I? How wrong indeed. People do say that Tennant's aged like a fine wine. I feel like the character has as well, and I just worry that sadly one of the big downfalls of this era is simply the fact that it's too short. But I feel like it was these 3 episodes or nothing, and what would we have rather had? David Tennant not returning ever to Doctor Who in a new role, and this rather exciting set of stories, or a year of complete nothingness before Ncuti comes along into the role, which was probably the other alternative. And let's face it as well, for Doctor Who's 60th anniversary year, that's not exactly the best. Of course, as well, we have all that different size stuff going on in the episodes, such as giant David Tennant chasing after small David Tennant, or regular-sized David Tennant, which I never thought that would happen within Doctor Who. So, I praise this episode for being wacky and weird, and I feel like the experience of viewing this episode live is something that I will never feel again. I feel like going into this story not knowing. I'm really glad I watched it live, because had I seen any clips or pictures beforehand, I would have knew what to expect. But the fact that this came absolutely out of nowhere was really special, and I hope that the experience of watching the giggle as well will be very, very similar to this, where the completely unexpected happens. But I like that. I think I said something during watching it, like, it reminds me of a twisted, dark version of In the Night Garden. That is what Wobbly Yonder is to me, just absurd and weird, and it doesn't quite make sense if you think about it too deeply, but at the same time, it's a very, very simple story. It's basically just stopping a countdown, but I think the various obstacles along the way really bring it to life. I think that playing with the otherworldly and the unknown is something of which that Doctor Who rarely does, and when it does, it always seems to go down really well. The likes of Blink, the likes of Heaven Sent, is just a little bit weird and wacky Doctor Who, and I think it definitely makes an impact. So hopefully throughout Ncuti's era we will see a lot more of that. Who knows, maybe Fenric will return or something like that. But I suppose even in the next story we have that element of surrealness in there as well, with the likes of the Toymaker. I am in a rather unusual situation with Wobbly Yonder, because I really do like the story. I like it for its experimentalness. I think it's a really watchable story, even once you've seen it and you know the twists. I think that seeing the differences in acting from the two main protagonists, the way they act good but also bad at the same time, I think that observing those performances is really, really intriguing and makes the episode enjoyable. But then I come back to that thought that this is Doctor Who's 60th anniversary, and it doesn't particularly do anything 60th anniversary-ish. There's not really many references to wider Doctor Who canon, and I know that that is something that people may not appreciate because they expect cameo central, they want classic companions coming back, classic Doctors coming back, and I think that that is something that does take a little bit of getting used to, but I think at the same time this episode embraces what Doctor Who is, and I do like it because of that. I'm just not quite sure if it does fit the 60th anniversary, but I'm glad it was done with this Doctor companion dynamic. The very fact that we know the relationship between this Doctor and Donna very well already, I think that had you tried to replicate this, say with Ncuti and Millie, it wouldn't have quite had the same effect, simply because if it was in their first series, we've not actually known them as characters for long enough. And I've only just noticed the weird irony at this point within the editing process, an episode where we have 2 Doctors and 2 Donnas, and then at the same time we have me who's editing this video keeping on butting in every so often. So there's 2 host productions as well, which was entirely unplanned, but I kind of like the concept, and I feel like I want to say I planned it because it's quite cool. So there we go, that has been Wild Blue Yonder, another fun episode as a part of Doctor Who's 60th anniversary. I really do like this one. I like how bold it is, I like the fact that it is very well lit and vibrant. It makes for a change from the darker colour palette that we've seen within quite a number of Doctor Who episodes within recent years, and as a result I really do feel like this episode is a good example of what is to come with Doctor Who, especially in Ncuti's era. I think there are a few questions raised by this story. With the whole thing with Mavity, it was quite fun. I can't help but think there is maybe a little bit more to it, who knows? But as an actual concept, this episode really did immerse me. I found it really, really enjoyable. But who knows, we will have to see what the giggle holds, which at the current time of recording is in an hour or two's time. So yeah, I probably won't get this review actually edited in time, come to think of it. Oops. So there we go, see you on the flip side as David Tennant regenerates into Ncuti Gatwa. And hopefully, the Toymaker doesn't hurt or go anywhere near Donna Noble.